Hello there, and welcome back to another ClueCon Weekly. It's David Duffett here, Worldwide Community Advocate at SignalWire, and I'm delighted this week to be joined by Irwin Lazar from Washington, D.C. How are you doing, Irwin?
Doing great. Nice to meet you, David.
Nice to meet you too, Irwin. I was reading up about what you do and where you are, and I understand that you're with Nemertes Research. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're a small research company based in the U.S., headquartered in Chicago, and we spend our time gathering data from end-user organizations. So we conduct primary research into what technologies are companies using and why are they using them, and then we look mostly at what are the characteristics of successful deployments and how do we look at how do we measure success, and then what are the approaches that correlate with success.
Well, that would be a great thing to be doing anytime. But since you look at video collaboration and remote working and things like that, I guess now is an extra specially good time to be looking into those things.
Yeah, the collaboration world has been pretty busy for the last few weeks as companies have shifted to work from home much more quickly than they ever anticipated, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. New verbs like Zoom and stuff like that. Irwin, I would love to get into some of the things that you've been finding. But before we do, just in case the folk watching ClueCon Weekly have not met you before, can you give us a little bit of your career history and how you came to be doing what you do now, please?
Yeah, sure. So I've been an analyst now for about 18 years. Prior to that, my background was in network engineering and network operations. So I used to build networks and manage them and consult on network architecture and so on. And had the opportunity to fall into this thing called voice over IP a number of years ago. Apologize, there's my cat hopping in the back of the video there. From there, started writing about it, consulting with organizations, digging in a number of the underlying technologies, and have moved as voice over IP has become unified communications and now team collaboration and a strong emphasis on video. Have kind of tracked along with those trends.
Great stuff. And I see you also do a bit of writing for No Jitter. And is that sort of in the same vein alongside your research, or do you kind of go out on a tangent for things like that?
So I cover unified communications for No Jitter, and then I also, No Jitter launched a sister site that's called Workspace Connect that's focused on the intersection of facilities, HR, and collaboration. And so I've started writing about topics related to managing a virtual workforce and using some AI-related capabilities within video to support facilities. So it's sort of that intersection of what can HR and facilities people learn from collaboration software, and how can collaboration folks support their needs as well.
Great stuff. Now, you were looking at video collaboration solutions before all of the current set of circumstances occurred and came along and kind of changed everybody's world. What differences have you noticed between your kind of working day back then and the things you were coming across and what goes on now?
Yeah, I think video has really become key. As we're about to publish some data this week that shows that prior to the pandemic, about 63% of organizations had people working from home. That's up over 91 now. And then if you look at the percentages, it's about double. So even that 60% that had work from home employees, it was typically about 25 to 30% or so that were work at home. That's now up north of 70%. So as we've seen that trend, the two big factors for IT and folks in communication collaboration. One is, how do I give those people an environment that they can communicate and collaborate as maybe not as well as if they're in the same office, but as close as possible. So leveraging things like video and team collaboration and cloud communications and so on. And then the second part has been, how do I make sure those people are engaging with one another? How do they avoid isolation and create almost a fun workspace for people who might be working from home? And obviously a lot of people are not getting out very much. They're not seeing other human beings. So how can we establish a culture around work from home?
Yeah, but there seems to be, well, at least two divergent approaches. One is, as you mentioned, the kind of recreation of what we can do within an office context and using technology to kind of map onto our everyday office experience. But the other one is going in the opposite direction to say, how can we work collaboratively and leave behind the shackles of the office and start a new way of working that doesn't depend on that. And I've heard both talked about, and in the non-office one, people's remote working or distributed working becomes very asynchronous. Different people working at different times of days, and in fact, one of the things that comes out on that side of things is the importance of written work, and the ability to communicate through writing rather than just doing all the face-to-face things is a very, very interesting sphere. Have you come across any of that?
Yeah, I think the idea of flex time has come into play. That people tend to prefer to work their own schedules. There are a lot of people who like to get up at the same time in the morning and go for a run and take a shower, put on nice clothes, sit in front of their desk. There are others that take advantage of the fact that if I'm working from home, maybe I can work around my family, or have that flexibility. If my kids are home, for example, and they're taking classes online, I can get together for lunch, we can go outside, and then come back at night and work as well. Historically, we've seen that a lot of work at home folks, a lot of it depends on the nature of the job and how often you have to be online. But a lot of work at home folks tend to set their own hours and tend to work later at night. Certainly written communication is key, and being able to have a means of communicating that doesn't involve email is usually a pretty strong correlation. Another key factor we found in our study is that most companies expect that this work from home phenomena is not short term, meaning that hey, hopefully we have a vaccine at some point, or a viable treatment, and then everybody goes back to the way it was. That probably won't happen. So we've seen the rush to go to work from home now, and I think you'll see more of an effort to make sure that you overcome that short term, hey, let's get everybody online and communicating, collaborating, and then let's figure out how to optimize it and secure it has been an area that people are looking at as they think long term, and as they think that this isn't just a short term trend.
Yeah, indeed. I know that colleagues who work in the industry, in the more kind of hosted PBX part of it, have found a massive rush on things like PoE switches and plug top adapters, AC adapters, to make their VoIP phones work from home. When they got them home, of course, they realised they didn't have PoE and that kind of stuff, and headsets as well, of course. But that curve or that spike will go down as people get settled, and you're quite right. I'm sure people will look to optimise. Now, you talked about your research and that you've got something coming out before too long, Irwin. Is that something that's made freely publicly available, or is it a paid-for report? How does your work kind of come out into the general community?
Yeah, so the report will be on our website. It's a pay to download report. We are conducting a free webinar that's scheduled for the 23rd of April, but that's on our website as well at nemertes.com. So we do share the results publicly. We'll be writing about them on places like No Jitter that we mentioned earlier, but the detailed numbers and so on, that's available to our research clients, or people can download and buy the report.
Right, and have you noticed people making increased inquiries with you in terms of reaching out, because they're considering what their options are?
Yeah, quite a bit. The biggest issue has been the security issues related to Zoom that have been all over the media for the last couple of weeks. So we've had a number of our clients have come to us and said, what do we do? Are these actual issues that we need to be concerned about? Or are they overblown by the press? And then looking at, for companies that have not yet really that are kind of behind the curve a little bit on a cloud strategy and a unified communication strategy. And there's still a lot of people using desktop telephones and that don't have video and are still relying on email for collaboration, and none of those translate well to virtual work. So we've got a number of requests of how do I get started? What are the things I need to think about? And then, as I mentioned earlier, some of the work that we've been doing has been looking at the management of work-at-home workforces. So, again, how do you keep those people engaged? How do you have a social interaction that that allows people to build those interpersonal relationships that they have when they're in the office, and that people don't feel that I'm isolated, I'm at home, I never see anybody, and nobody knows what I'm doing, and my work's not getting noticed.
I'd like to come on to that in a moment, Irwin, the kind of more, I don't know whether social is the right word, but the human factor stuff. But before we do that, you mentioned the Zoom security concern. So just broadening that topic out much more widely. As we mentioned when we were talking, perhaps just before we recorded, these video collaboration solutions are getting a very, very good user test now. Before, it was they were in the hands of people that wanted them and learnt them. All of a sudden, they've come into the hands of really the masses. And I wondered whether your research or even just feedback that you've heard anecdotally has uncovered any deficiencies or feature requests, if you like, for the current crop of solutions that are just not there.
Yeah, it's interesting to think that yesterday I spent a couple of minutes getting my wife up and running on a video call with some of her college friends. First time she'd ever used video, and my kids are using it now for distance learning and so on. And so I'm a scout leader here in the U.S., and we do all of our scout meetings now over video. So there's just so much adoption of it outside of the workplace that has led to this massive explosion, and all of the vendors are reporting triple-digit growth in utilization. It's been remarkable. I think the feature, so the two areas that we've seen, one is these services were designed primarily for business use. So the focus was, how do I get people to join as frictionless as possible? Send you a link, you click on the link, you're in the meeting. That works great if that meeting link is private. If that meeting link is being shared on a public website, or what we've seen has been that students who are getting links to join their classes, and they're saying, I really don't want to be in this class today, so I'm going to pop that link into a Discord server and tell strangers out on the internet, hey, go hop in the class and disrupt it so I don't have to go to class today. So the services have had to rapidly evolve to push forward on some of the features that were always there, the ability to password protect meetings, the ability to have waiting rooms, the ability to have a host that can control access and turn people's microphones off and things like that. Those are the kinds of things you don't normally need in a business call. But if you're using these kind of services for consumer use, or classes or things like that, you've now exposed a lot of the potential avenues of entry that really weren't an issue in the business world. So I think a lot of it is around education and configuring defaults. To call out Zoom again, one of the things that they did was they changed the default setting. So now you need a password to join a meeting, and you have the waiting room enabled by default. So I think that's that has probably been the biggest area that we've seen as far as organizations having to adapt to. I talked earlier about the first challenge was the rush. Get everybody at home, get them up online. Now it's okay. How do we deal with some of these issues that have popped up?
Yeah, interesting. I was talking to a chap called Tim Panton from a company called Pipe just last week, and he was talking about the contextual requirements around video collaboration, and he said the same thing as you, that they'd been built for business use. But if you've now got, for instance, a Pilates teacher that wants to run a class over video, that's a different set of requirements. Or if you've got hobbyists that want to exchange ideas, again, that's a different set of requirements. And his work was looking at the context around the use case and how it might be required differently. Just before we leave that area, Irwin, anything else in terms of features? You've mentioned security is the thing that needs to have been beefed up. And I'm sure it will be. But in terms of any kind of missing features aside from security, has anything come to your attention just yet, or is it too early, really?
Yeah, no, I think most of the basic features are there, for people to be able to chat, and especially if you integrate with team collaboration and you have the video call in the context of a meeting space where you can share notes and so on. The one feature that people seem to love are the virtual backgrounds. A lot of the calls that I'm on in and outside of work, people are throwing up pictures of their vacations or funny pictures or whatever. So I think that's become almost something that the vendors will look at and say, if I don't have virtual background today, I need to get it ASAP. So I think that's probably been the one feature you see a lot of discussion around.
Right, extreme personalization, like people like to do with their mobiles and stuff like that. So just earlier you touched on the human side of things, and the way people work from home and how that differs from the way they used to do things, and how their interactions are conducted, and also how they manage their time. Again, what kind of things have come out to you in that sphere?
Yeah, I think the challenge has been from a management standpoint, to manage people remotely involves a little bit different skill set, and I think a little bit different approach. If you're working with your team during a normal work day, and say you're one of those folks who have all of your teammates in your physical location, you check in the morning, maybe you have a status meeting at some point, you go out to lunch together, maybe at the end of the day, you kind of chat about what's going on. You lose all of that when people are now remotely working. So I think the advice that we have been telling our clients is it's really important for you to replicate as much of that as you can. So a foundational element, again, is kind of that team chat space where people can chat throughout the day about projects they're working on and get help and share ideas and so on. But then also scheduling check-ins with your employees, whether that's a all hands call in the morning at 9 a.m. Let's talk about what's going on during the day, and then we get back together at 5 p.m. and talk about what we've accomplished. Again, adjusting for flex work schedules, possibly checking in individually with people, find out how they're doing. Are they comfortable working from home? Making sure they have a good workspace where they can close the door, where they've got decent lighting, where they don't have kids and pets running around behind them. Although a lot of the video calls we've seen now have really gotten more casual to the point where you don't need to be as professional as you once did. But I think all of that that focus on continuing to make sure that the team members are engaged. One of the things we've seen that organizations do now is a Friday happy hour, 5 o'clock. Hey, everybody get on, bring your kids, bring your pets, bring your family. Have a drink and whatever, and encourage some social interaction, because this isn't the way human beings have been designed to be locked at home by themselves, afraid to go outside. This is all new to all of us.
Indeed, yeah, that's great. I was going to say that things like animals in the background and other stuff going on, as long as it's not too distracting, actually makes for a more interesting set of interactions, doesn't it? And some kind of off-tangent conversations that are necessary. They're the sort of thing you'd have in a real-life office, aren't they? Where you go off and discuss things and then come back onto the subject you're discussing.
Yeah, I remember the video that went viral a couple of months ago. I think was it a British politician whose child walked in behind him during a staff meeting?
I didn't see that.
Yeah, I've seen actually people take that and make it into a live video and use it as a virtual background. So yeah, right. People are trying to have some fun with the technology.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting to hear your insights, and I would like to come on in a moment to ask you about what you think the future looks like for this technology and this scenario. But before I do that, and perhaps we'll make the future-gazing part our last part of the conversation. So is there anything else, Irwin, you'd like to discuss, or you think it would be good to put out to the ClueCon Weekly audience?
I think I would recommend that folks do kind of take a step back at some point and do due diligence. A lot of folks are grabbing the first solution that they can, or they're looking at a lot of the UC vendors have created free offerings, for trial type. You get till the end of June for free, but that may not be the best offering for you, and you want to take a step back and think about what the cost is of the solutions I'm using. How do they integrate into my applications? How can I manage them? How can I scale them? What features do I really need? So I think it's worth for organizations to at some point take a step back and say, okay, we rushed a solution out, but was that the best solution, or should we look at something else? I think that's most important. Above and beyond that, I think again, paying attention to the HR aspect or the social aspect, and conducting surveys of employees is something we recommend, that you ask people, do they have the right tools? You make this assumption that once everyone has video, we're done, but there are other tools that are part of the toolkit too, things like project management, task management, ideation tools, and so on. So thinking about the virtual collaboration as beyond just real-time collaboration applications.
Yeah, very much so. I'm sure that people like Basecamp and Monday and other tools like that are probably seeing a hike in use as well. And so, of course, this is advice for the consumers of these products and services. Do you ever speak to the vendors themselves and give advice in those directions?
Yeah, we work with a number of vendors in the space. Mostly the challenge for them right now is they want to understand, is this short term or long term? Do people go back to the office? So you think about somebody who's selling video conferencing systems designed for conference rooms. That's a questionable business right now, given are people going to come back to the office, or do you rapidly transition to focusing on supporting improved experiences for people that work at home? I think, for the vendor community, again, making things as frictionless as possible, thinking about interoperability with different applications, integration with applications. A big focus for us over the last couple of years has been around the idea of contextual collaboration, of integrating workflows into collaborative applications. So I'm not in a chat and then I'm going to a video call and I'm going back to my CRM application, I'm going back to another application, but I'm working with my team and the data and the applications all within a single consolidated workspace. I think that's really, one of the core areas where people can measure improvements in productivity and customer support, and even we've seen improvements in sales close rates as you can more quickly respond to opportunities.
Great stuff, and actually you kind of led us into that last topic of what the future might look like. So is there anything else you'd like to say about where video collaboration tools are going in terms of what their functionality might be, or in terms of the way we might use them into the future?
Yeah, I think you'll continue to see consolidation. The idea of buying a video application as a standalone application is kind of going away. That you tend to look at, how do I integrate that into a chat app? How do I integrate it into a contextual workspace? And even integrate into a phone system. So, ideally you'd have a single app that can do all of that for you. I think you're also going to see more importance on presentation type capabilities. So today, a lot of organizations, if they want to do a large scale presentation, would go to a dedicated platform for that, but they'll increasingly look at, can I leverage the video meeting application I have to deliver, whether it's internal presentations, customer focused presentations, or so on. So that requires a different control set. Some of the things we talked about earlier, moderation and host, and being able to mute people's microphones and so on. So I think that's something we're looking at in our research, is that consolidation of different applications. And then I think lastly, what we've been looking at, predominantly in our research is the hypothesis, as I mentioned earlier, is that this isn't a short-term event. That whether it and I'm not talking necessarily about COVID, but the idea of work from home. And so, if this becomes the norm and the office is the exception, that leads to a lot of changes from a real estate. I think one of the things I've joked about, and maybe more serious than joking, but companies are really going to quickly realize how much money they can save in real estate. If I don't need offices, so that could accelerate the trend toward work from home. So that means, again, having management insight, having capabilities to see who are using the applications, how often are they using it, some of it gets intrusive when you start thinking about looking at whether or not people are paying attention to meetings and so on. But I think there's an opportunity for the vendors to ramp up their ability to deliver management capabilities that look at performance. The home network is no longer something you don't worry about. If you want to have people working successfully at home, they may not know how to measure Wi-Fi signal strength across their house, or look for alternative internet services that support higher bandwidth. Those are all areas where I think corporate IT and the vendor community can help support some of those needs.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too. I remember some years ago when people started looking at IP phone VPN connectivity. Before that, people had been using VPNs from their home routers or routers onto the corporate network, and of course you got the problem that the kids' PS2 or Xbox or whatever was ending up on people's corporate networks and stuff. And so soon enough, we had the VPN software on the phones rather than on the routers. It's an interesting point. The other thing that crossed my mind as you were speaking, Irwin, is we already see in the world of collaboration, whether it's voice or video, in fact mostly in voice at this time, the idea of sentiment analysis and AI type applications, and they've so far been used for business and customer communication. So being able to tell whether your customer is happy or sad or whatever that might be. But do you see a place for that kind of thing becoming used in the corporate exchange environment, where bosses might be looking to see, how their employees are responding, not just in terms of what they say, but kind of how they're saying it?
Definitely. Again, looking at attitude, I think most importantly, you will be looking at participation. There are people like we talked about earlier that, they're not comfortable in this environment, and they may not speak up, and they may not participate in meetings for fear of, I don't want to interrupt somebody, or I'm just, from a personality standpoint, this isn't the way I like to communicate. And as a manager, I would love to be able to look at a meeting afterwards and say, okay, these 4 people out of the 10 attendees did 80% of the talking, and I never heard from these other 6 people. I need to go back and talk to them and find out what was there something you had to say that you never really got a chance to, or B, do you just not feel like this is a good environment for you? So yeah, I think having a lot of the focus has been on attention analysis, looking at how are people playing solitaire when they should be paying attention to the meeting. But I think you'll see more of a focus on engagement within those meetings.
Very, very interesting stuff. And of course, some of the collaboration tools that are available now do give things like speaker percentages and stuff like that. Well, great. Irwin, it's been very good of you to come on and share some of your knowledge and wisdom with us. We thank you very much for coming along to the ClueCon Weekly studio.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
It's great to have you along, and we'll see you elsewhere, I'm sure, at trade shows or virtual trade shows or whatever it might be in the future.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be live events at some point. I'm one of those who, I traveled previous to the pandemic, at least twice a month, and being at home is definitely a lot of fun. I'm not complaining because I've spent a lot more time with my kids, but I also do miss that one-on-one and group engagement.
I'm with you. Anyway, thank you very much, Irwin, and all the best to you.
Thank you.